Hello everybody, this is the ROG Raikiri Pro. Super fancy looking box. Check this out, Red Dot winner 2022 Design Award. This works on the Xbox Series X or S, Xbox One, and Windows. Look at all these features. We're gonna go through them together. Obviously you can plug it in and use it wired. And then on the back of the controller here, there's a 2.4 GHz wireless dongle, and it's also got Bluetooth as well. And stick around because I'm going to talk about the differences in terms of input lag between these methods. And here's the controller. Immediately you're going to notice that this thing looks like it's something that came straight out of Halo. Looks super cool. It's got grippy handles as well. This looks and feels a lot like the Xbox Series X controller. They're about the same size. This guy feels a little bit lighter though. The build quality is pretty good. No flexing or anything. And I really like the Xbox controller design because of the angle handles here. You see the wrist doesn't bend at all. It just goes straight down. It's very comfortable to use. The favorite thing about this controller to me are the switches. Listen to this. Now listen to this. They sound almost identical, right? I've tested enough controllers to know that this feels like metal switches. And as far as I'm aware, the only other controllers that use metal switches are Xbox controllers, the official Xbox controllers. And I just love the tactility of these switches. Now when you compare that to the PlayStation controller, you don't feel anything. These are super soft, they're not clicky at all. That's because this controller and almost every other controller use rubber dome based switches, but not this guy. The face buttons are really good because of the switches, but it's also got this cool letter designs too. It's like a shadow design. Looks really nice. In terms of spacing, they're close enough where you can press both buttons at once. You can also play Claw too. This is great for Soul Calibur or Tekken. Now let's get to the sticks. These are pretty light in terms of tension. They're actually even lighter than the Xbox controller too. It's got grippy stick caps here. In terms of rotations, these aren't very smooth just because they're so light. Kind of choppy. The shoulder buttons are pretty good. You can press it on both sides, and there's a little bit of a gap here so you don't accidentally press on them. Now these triggers are really interesting. They are super small. Look at this. And the travel is not very far either. They do have a little bit of tension to them though. These are a little heavier than on the Xbox trigger. Honestly, the small size is not an issue for me. In fact, I kind of like it. There's also a trigger lock here. This is going to make it act like a button. Alright, let's get into the D-pad. This D-pad has got to be the most sensitive D-pad I've ever used. I just press it once and then it skips characters. That happened again. You would think that's because this thing double clicks, but that's not true. When I press it, it's just one. You know what's actually happening here? Sometimes when you just do a quick tap, it'll register as a hold. It makes it difficult to navigate menus sometimes, but in-game, it doesn't really affect anything at all actually. This D-pad is great for 2D fighting games, great for motion inputs. And this is mainly due to the disc-shaped nature of the D-pad. It's super easy for me to do circular motions. No problem at all.
This is your last ride. Let's go.
I can do his special throw pretty easily. And this move is actually 2 full circular motions plus punch. But since this is a disc, the surface area here is smooth. So you can move your thumb around super easily. Double taps are really quick. You can do charge moves with this D-pad pretty easily as well. Not a problem at all. Quarter circle motions. This move here is going to be super hard to do, is back forward kick, but on this controller, no problem. This thing is just great with motion inputs. In terms of 3D games like DOA 6 here, where you have to be super precise with diagonals, this D-pad is good but not great. I want to do this, but sometimes he does that. There's a button here underneath this side and another button here at the bottom. If you are off and only one button registers, you're gonna miss your input. When doing diagonals, you're gonna make sure you press right here where this line is at, and then press both buttons at once. I find that when you press it harder, it makes it easier. Down back is the most tricky direction to execute. Up back, no problem. Up forward, no problem. Down forward, and get it pretty much 100% of the time. But down back, not 100%. And this is due to the nature of the disc shape. You just don't have a lot of feel for the diagonals, you know? Whereas with something like this, you can really feel the two buttons. Here you gotta get the sweet spot and you can't really feel it. There are these lines here to help you, but you can't really feel it, unfortunately. At first you're gonna probably get frustrated with diagonals on this D-pad, but let me tell you, the more you use it, the more you get used to it, and it really does become better. If you flip the controller over, you're gonna see 4 additional buttons. The 2 lower ones are pretty easy to use and reach, and they protrude out quite a bit. Pretty easy to press. But the ones above it, they're next to impossible to press. To reach the upper buttons, you gotta angle your hands outward like this. I don't recommend using these upper buttons for anything other than menu navigations or shortcuts. Now you notice that there's also this screen right here. This is actually an OLED screen where you can customize things. You can select profiles, wallpaper. Wallpaper is really cool. Let's go in there. There's a total of 4 wallpapers you can select at a time. You can download the Armory Crate utility to customize this controller, but it will only recognize it when it's wired. Looks like there's a new firmware update. Let's update it. Here you can change the settings for the triggers, the sticks. You can set the dead zone, and you can assign the back buttons, or you can use it to change the joystick sensitivity. This will be great for shooters. You can choose between rapid, linear, or gentle, or you can customize your own. Just like on the Xbox controllers, there's 4 points of vibrations here. You can change the RGB lighting on this controller as well. Honestly, this controller has some of the best RGB implementation on a controller. And this is the first time I've ever left the RGB on a controller. This is the setting for the OLED display. You can choose between the existing ones here, or you can upload your own GIF files. Alright, it's input lag time. On wired, at minimum we have about 2 milliseconds, maximum about 8 milliseconds, not a lot of jitter at all, and the average input delay is just a tick under 4 milliseconds. The polling rate range here is about 250 Hz. This is actually on the faster side in terms of controllers. It's in the same range as a lot of the faster controllers here when we use the 2.4 GHz dongle. Minimum input delay around 2 milliseconds. Maximum is about 11, so the range is a little bit bigger. Jitter is at 1 millisecond, so it's a lot higher than wired. An average input delay is 7.87 milliseconds. This is about twice as much as wired. And that makes a lot of sense when you look at the polling rate. Look at this, it's about half. Do not use Bluetooth if you get this controller. Minimum input delay 0.5. Wow, that started off really well, right? Maximum 104 milliseconds. Just look at this range. It's comical actually. And look at this jitter. This is the most jitter I've ever seen on any controller. It's over 8.5 milliseconds of jitter. And this really explains the huge range that we have here. What this means is you're gonna have a lot of random spikes with input lag. So sometimes it can be fast and then sometimes it can be hella slow. And it's not gonna feel consistent at all. Average input delay, 16.71 milliseconds. That's 1 frame. And most fighting games are 60 frames per second. This is the highest input delay I've ever seen in any of my tests. And check out this polling rate. It's a measly 60 Hz. Oh my. I beg you, please do not use this controller on Bluetooth. Alright, final thoughts. I really like this controller. I think it looks super cool. It just looks really futuristic, and I like the 2 shades here. I love the metal base switches, and this D-pad is really good for 2D fighters. And the RGB is really cool as well. It just comes out of the box like this. There's no extra stick caps, nothing to switch around, just the controller, and it works really well. Alright, that's it for me. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a like, subscribe for more, and take care now.